Hey guys, Zomfox here, and today it's time to look at some pretty massive news we saw yesterday, and that is going to be the fact that the UFL has officially renegotiated the USFLPA CBA. For those of you who don't know, the USFLPA is the Players Association from the USFL that was able to form an actual union and then was able to get an actual CBA made for the USFL's 2023 season, and they went into the UFL renegotiating the contract, and it has been renegotiated. There are some players who are very upset at this. And, well, let's just look at what actually changed. So, all of these are photos that the USLPA themselves put out that pretty much put in detail exactly how the overall structure of these contracts have changed. So, we have the 2022 USFL season, which was before the union, then the 23 season with the union, which was the contract that was a big deal because it essentially became better than the XFL contract that was available, and then the 2024 USFLPA Union Season 2, which is this season's UFL contract. So first of all, naturally we see the contract term is a bit different, but the big one is the active salary. The active salary increases from $5,350 this past year to $5,500, a $150 pay raise per week, which goes to $1,500 for the regular season. Now, while it might not sound like a massive increase, you got to remember that coaches took a pay cut to coach in the UFL, at least from what we've been told. So the fact that the players got any increase at all is pretty incredible, especially when you look at the camp salary also going up to $150 per week. And the fact that for this season only, granted, but for this season 75 players will be on a camp. That's a pretty big deal that we have a $150 pay raise for the camp itself. Now the inactive salary and housing stipend stay the same from last year, but considering how good they were last year, it's a pretty big deal that that's staying the same. Now we look into the next part, and we're going to look at the most important one here, which is pretty much, well, there's a couple, but the main one is the minimum active roster size. This is a big deal. There's a lot of inactive roster spots. There's like 10-ish, but active roster spot, that's where you make the real money, as we saw in the last part, as you go up from a pretty distant amount, going from 2,500 to 5,500. And we have two more spots on the active roster. The minimum active roster goes from 40 to 42. Now, travel to and from practice is still provided. The jet depth chart is the exact same it was. The travel reimbursement is the exact same. But the player accolade bonus is a new one. Now, the XFL had a win bonus, but the player accolade bonus is one that is for the players themselves. If you are voted a player of the week, they do an offensive, special, and defensive, you get $1,000. Meaning, in theory, if you were to win all 10 of them for your position group or your side of the ball, you'd get an extra 10 grand. You make the all UFL team another 2,500. You're an offensive player of the year, special teams player of the year. I'd assume sportsman of the year, you get another 5 grand. And if you're the MVP of the league, you get 7,500. Look, this is a massive deal, and we'll talk about it more when I get to some of the players that are upset about it, but I don't think anyone's really talking about this. If you win MVP, that pretty much guarantees that you made the all-UFL team, and it pretty much guarantees that you were a player of the week a couple times, meaning that if you're that guy, you're going to be making an extra 10 grand easy. Now, yes, this isn't going to affect everybody, but the fact that we're seeing such massive bonuses for these accolades is a pretty big deal. And then player appearances go up from 150 to 150 to 250. Not a massive difference, but it's a bit different. And then the second to last group is going to be the travel meals is the same, but they do now have a severance fund. You now get a 250 grand severance amount, which is a pretty big deal. And then the player fine reduction as well. Your first fine as a player is now only $50 instead of $250. And there's actually going to be more athletic trainers on the team instead of just one head trainer like back in 22 or one head and one assistant. It's now one head and two assistants. Now, there is injured reserve again, 5-game injured reserve. But here's the big one. If you're on the injured reserve, you now receive the housing stipend. You did not receive that last year. So now if you're on the injured reserve, you don't have to worry about the housing pay. Then the last group of stuff, the camp injured reserve, the inactive pay scale is what you get now versus the 700 pay scale you got before. So that's a pretty big deal. Then we have the season ending injured reserve, where it's the same. You get a camp invite for the following season. Grievances and arbitration is the same. But now the player's right to second opinion is now a neutral physician to resolve disputes instead of a player's physician of choice. And then there is a concussion protocol that is baseline testing the clear protocol instead of literally none. and off-season play is now non-competitive leagues allowed. I'm assuming, and no one exactly knows what that means, but we're assuming that pretty much means NFL and CFL. Considering the fact that the Arena Football League plays at like the same time, it's safe to say it's probably for those two leagues. You get more money as well in the CFL than you do in the UFL, so it makes sense. So that's all the changes that we've seen. It's a pretty massive amount of changes, despite the fact that it might not seem like it, but it's overall really good. Yet some people are complaining about it. Now I've only pulled the one example, but there's a couple others. I believe Marlon Williams and a couple other guys said stuff. J.M.R. Smith, of course, no pay raise, new league, new opportunities, huh? SMH. Now, he also has some other threads. You can pretty much go look him up on Twitter if you want. There's a decent amount of him being upset about it. Let's just be real here. The idea that any of these players are complaining makes no sense. Mark Thompson on Instagram, his story, which by the time this video comes out is probably already been 24 hours, he put it best. I think he actually did put a tweet out. He put it best that you essentially, if you play 4 years and there's no difference in pay, you're getting about 200 grand. In fact, you're technically getting paid more, but naturally taxed and all that. You're getting about 200 grand for 40 weeks of work. That is less than a full year, and 200 grand is a ton of money. And that's true. The fact is, already, you're getting paid a really good amount already. Number two, you're not doing a real job. You're playing a sport. And now I know everyone says, oh, but the brutalness of the game. You're playing a sport. You're not doing a real job. Look, I mean, you hear all the time about how like 40 grand is like this base yearly salary for people. These players are getting 50 plus grand during the season. That's not counting how much they get paid during training camp and all that. So essentially for like, let's just say 15 weeks during a year, they're getting over 60 grand. They're getting paid more than an average worker does working the entire year. The idea that any of these players are complaining when they got a pay raise and the coaches got a pay cut, and the players now have a bunch of other extra benefits or accolade bonuses they can get, makes no sense. The fact is that this is a really good sign that the league cares about its players, and it does mean that. Means that also that the XFL, again, made a massive mistake, their players, in not having a PA. Considering the fact that USLPA has now come away with another W. They came out with a W reportedly in keeping the Gamblers players, and another W in getting another renegotiation on the contract. Fact is, this is massive for the players. You're getting an extra $150 per week in active bonus or active roster pay. You're getting a bunch of other extra bonuses you can get and other different benefits. It's an overall a massive upgrade over what they had before. There really is no right to complain. It's a really good thing. Really solid changes that I'm honestly kind of shocked at. I really did not expect any sort of pay raise. So this is definitely a welcome surprise in regards to players getting, compensation. Pretty solid. So make sure you subscribe and hit the bell. Remember, we do have a giveaway at 1,000 subscribers. We are trying to hit 500 before the season starts. And as always, have a great night.